So you also had an Act 1 challenge where Iris kills Sergei. In a great scene, and then also, the blood and the we reveal that she's a robot. What went into that sequence? Because again, this is a turning point for the movie, and you have to reset a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So I talked about this on Hard Eyes a little bit, but same with Companion. The end of Act 1 is are very important things. This is the scene we worked on the most in Companion. The end of Act 1 with killing Sergei, and we're approaching it from a point of a tension scene of when to build up tension, and also when to kind of build up enough intrigue and interest and enough narrative questions that springs you off into the second act, that hopefully buys you a lot of interest and intrigue. And that is the reveal of, like, she's a robot, the Iris go to sleep. You don't reveal that she's a robot, you reveal that, like, she's being controlled by Josh somehow. What does that mean? It could mean something else. But we went through several different versions of the Sergei sequence of when to stay down with the attack or when to intercut. We had other versions of the scene where we only hint at the attack and we pop back upstairs and reveal Iris covered in blood. We had other versions of the scene where we played out the attack in a linear form entirely on the beach, and then we only cut up after Sergei is stabbed in the neck and killed. So that, when I say it was worked on the most, it was worked on because we didn't know when to intercut upstairs and when to stay down below. And that was a question that we were asking our friends and family. That's a question that Drew and I are discussing back and forth. That's something that my co-editor, Josh Ethier, and I talked about as well, and he worked on with Drew. And so it's a question of when does that pressure become too much for this film? It's an assault scene, it's harrowing, but when does that become too much that you kind of disengage from the movie? So that became a question of when do we feel like we've reached a nice point where we've built enough pressure and you've kind of plateaued that you can go somewhere else? And when can we cut upstairs maybe to relieve that tension a little bit? And that's where we go to Harvey Guillen. And Harvey's like telling this story up at brunch, and we had him improv so many different stories about, his hangover and about these stories about, in New York or whatever. There's like 10 different versions of that. And ultimately we used, I think, one of the more concise versions because we have to keep the plot moving and the story moving. But if we ever release a blooper reel of the film, like, there's great stuff in there. Again, it becomes when do you keep the plot going and versus the story moving versus when do you kind of take a moment to breathe and build up tension? And so that's just trial and error, back and forth. And again, with the eyes going white at the very end, in the intercut of that, of the violence and the attack down on the ground, it's trying to stay one step ahead of the audience, trying to stay ahead of their expectations. And so when those eyes go white, when Josh says, Iris, go to sleep, we cut to black. We don't give them the ability to linger on that shot, to question what happened. We cut off to black right away. We don't explain what happened. And then we just come in later on a slow push, on a dolly, on her white eyes, and we don't tell you what is happening. We let you then kind of catch up to us. And we found that moment in the theaters was such a wonderful thing in our test screening process. Yeah. When that happened, for some of these early audiences that hadn't seen the trailer, didn't know the premise of the movie, shouts, erupts, commotion. I think one of my favorite responses was in a room of like 200 people. Can I swear?
Yes.
Where the light, on YouTube. Like, Iris, go to sleep, boom. Yo, what the fuck? Someone in the audience somewhere. And we worked really hard on that sequence, and I'm very happy to see that it appears that it's working.